welcome back to Church Crime Time Tuesdays. Today is episode 4, and oh my gosh, this one, it's heartbreaking. It has literally taken me 3 weeks to research this case because once I would start researching one aspect, there would be just a complete curveball, and I would find something else that played into this story, and it is just wow. Hey guys, it is Post-Editing Lacey here. I'm just jumping in really quick to say I am sorry. I am going through editing today's video and I'm realizing just how much background noise there is. I have been having such a crazy schedule and I ended up filming this on a Saturday, which Saturdays are a huge no-go from now on because it is so busy outside. We had dogs in all of my neighborhood's backyards just barking constantly, and we had planes flying over all the freaking time. So I've learned my lesson. Don't film on a Saturday. I will come up with a better filming schedule for the future. So just bear with me through today's episode. I'm sorry. This story is so big, I'm actually going to be dividing it up into part 1 and part 2. Part 1 will be released, and then next week, part 2 will be released. It is literally that big of a story, and I didn't feel like I could tell the story in its entirety if I didn't include all of the details that I could. So it made it very long. Instead of having like a almost 2-hour episode, I just decided to break it up into part 1 and part 2. So as you read within the thumbnail, this is about Ravi Zacharias. If you do not know who Ravi Zacharias is, congratulations, because, oh Lord, he was a piece of trash. I'm just gonna say it. He was a piece of trash, okay? So first off, I want to give some trigger warnings. This is a very heavy case. It is going to be involving religious trauma, manipulation, narcissism, and a lot of sexual abuse and sexual manipulation. Also, just some housekeeping notes. I wanted to make sure everybody knew here that my schedule for Church Crime Time Tuesdays has changed. So if you follow me on TikTok, then you have already seen the update. If you don't follow me on TikTok, I don't know what you're doing. You need to hop on over there and follow me. I have decided I have a ton of stuff on my plate. As a lot of you know, I am actually in school right now for trauma recovery. I am a mom of 3, and I am just very busy when it comes to YouTube, TikTok, taking care of my kids, school, husband. My husband owns his own business, so like we have a lot on our plates, okay? So these cases can be a lot to research and really dig into. They can take a toll on my mental health. So I've decided that our schedule moving forward is going to be 3 on, 1 off. So there are going to be 3 videos released, and then in the 4th week, I'm going to take off. If you follow Bailey Syrian, that is actually the schedule that she does, and that's where I got this idea. Thank you, Bailey. If you love true crime and you don't follow her, I don't know what you are doing. She's amazing. So go on over there. I will tag her YouTube channel below in the description box. Go and give her a follow. She does amazing makeup and true crime content. She also has a podcast. She also has a podcast called The Dark History. It is phenomenal. She digs into all of the parts of our history that we were not taught in school. It's very interesting and very enlightening. I highly suggest that one as well. Okay, so for part 1 of the Ravi Zacharias case, we're going to get into who Ravi was, what he did, and the case between him and Lori Ann Thompson. Then next week, we will dig into the investigation that happened with the spa sexual assault allegations, the report, and what Ravi Zacharias International Ministries is up to today. So let's jump into part 1. So Ravi Zacharias was born March 26th, 1946. He was born in India. Him and his family were Anglican, but later on, Ravi converted to Christianity after an attempted suicide that failed. In 1966, Ravi and his family immigrated from India to Canada. Ravi then attended Ontario Bible College, which he did graduate with his undergrad degree in 1972. During the 70s and 80s, Ravi spent a lot of time evangelizing, traveling, and during this time is when Ravi decided that there was a huge need for an apologetics ministry. If you don't know what an apologetics ministry is or what apologetics is in general, let me explain. Basically, apologetics is when somebody argues to defend their religious beliefs. In Christian apologetics, they take Christian theology, natural theology, and philosophy to argue their basis for the Christian beliefs. Christian apologetics does this so that they can defend their faith and their religious beliefs against non-believers or people who come up and argue against their beliefs. Ravi said that he saw a need for apologetics ministry because it would not only help lead people to Christ, but it would help train other Christian leaders within the faith. So Ravi started his apologetics ministry in 1984, and he called it the Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, and it was located in Toronto, Canada. During this time, Ravi spent 40 years in ministry. He wrote 30 books, and he spent years traveling, evangelizing, teaching, and speaking to huge congregations. Now, it didn't take long for Ravi to grow in popularity. People saw him as a wonderful man of God, that he had great knowledge when it came to the Christian faith, and that God just used him as a mighty, mighty man of God within the Christian faith and within apologetics. It has also been noted that he was considered one of the greatest apologetics within Christianity in all of history. Unfortunately, in August 2017, a woman named Lori Ann Thompson and her husband Brad issued a letter to Ravi demanding that he pay $5 million because of his sexual and spiritual abuse against Lori Ann Thompson. Now, they issued this letter to Ravi personally through their lawyer. They didn't send it to, Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. They sent it to Ravi himself. In this letter, they gave Ravi two options. The first option they gave him was that he needed to notify the board at RZIM and all of his insurance holders personally and within the ministry that he was going to be pending litigation. Or his second option was to issue a check to Lori Ann Thompson for $5 million, and they would forego any kind of lawsuit of accusing Ravi of impropriety and exposing the relationship he had with Lori Ann Thompson and the text, which included nude photos of Lori Ann. Now, I know right off the bat that this letter sounds like Lori Ann Thompson and her husband Brad are just in it to try to get money out of Ravi, but as the years have gone on and more information on this case has come to light, we have found out that that was not the case. Lori Ann and Brad really wanted to do this in the way that would hopefully stop Ravi from hurting other people. They said that sending this letter was what they believed and that what they were told was very normal and just the step that you needed to take when trying to address a situation like this. They said that the only reason that they put a money amount on the letter was from the advice of their lawyer. Their lawyer had said that their letter would be taken more serious if there was a money amount put on it. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. It actually painted them in a very bad light, and it was an easy way for Ravi to put them in that bad light and make them look like they were just out to get money from him. Now, in this letter, they did give Ravi a deadline to respond. Ravi continually asked for extensions, which the Thompsons were kind enough to approve. And near the end of his last deadline with the Thompsons, Ravi turned around and filed a RICO lawsuit against the Thompsons. Now, if you don't know what a RICO lawsuit is, it stands for Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations. The weird thing when it comes to a RICO lawsuit is they're most of the time used to file lawsuits against the mob. RICO lawsuits give prosecutors the ability to go after the head guy of the mob while also going after everybody that's underneath him, including the hitman, the sellers and buyers, and basically everyone under their pyramid within the mob. So having a RICO lawsuit filed against the Thompsons was really weird and just didn't make sense for a lot of people. Ravi said that the reason he filed a RICO lawsuit was because he was accusing the Thompsons of trying to extort money from him by making very false allegations. So Ravi used multiple things to try to further advance his case with the RICO lawsuit against the Thompsons. He said that they were just trying to extort money from him, and one of the ways that he perpetuated this notion was because the Thompsons had already filed a lawsuit against another pastor a few years ago. So Ravi used this as a way of saying that the Thompsons were experienced extortionists. But what people didn't realize was back in 2008, Brad was a new Christian, and he was part of a church with a pastor named John Weiser. When he was under John Weiser's leadership, he was actually doing counseling with John. And over time, Brad actually invested money into Weiser's businesses. But over time, Brad had ended up losing $335,000 $500,000. So Brad filed a lawsuit against Visor, and it was a monetary gain type of lawsuit because Brad was trying to recoup what him and his businesses had lost while investing into John Visor. John actually ended up going bankrupt and Brad had to drop the lawsuit, but the denomination that John was ordained by, which is called the Christian Reformed Church in North America, actually came out saying that John was, quote, guilty of abuse of the office of a minister of the world and of deviating from godly conduct. And it's important to note that this lawsuit was when Brad was married to his previous wife. This was not a lawsuit when he was married to Lorianne Thompson. This was pre-Lorianne. Ravi also tried to paint the picture that Brad and Lorianne were hurting for money, and then that was the whole reason that they were trying to extort money from him. But if you look at Lorianne Thompson and Brad's finances and taxes from the year of 2016 and 2017, it shows that they were very well off, and it even shows that they made exponential amounts of donations to different causes. Also in Ravi's lawsuit, he tried to claim that it was Lorianne who asked to meet with him time and time again. But as more evidence has come out between their communication and emails have been leaked, it's actually the opposite, and Ravi is the one who asked Lorianne if they could meet in person. So before we get into the settlement of this lawsuit, I want to jump back and tell the whole story of Lorianne Thompson and Ravi's relationship. So back in 2014, Brad and Lorianne had attended a luncheon where Ravi was present. At this luncheon, Ravi took a very big interest in Lorianne from the get-go. He asked his assistant to get her email, which Lorianne gave because her and her husband were huge fans of Ravi and his work. And after this luncheon, it didn't take but a quick amount of time for Ravi to reach out and start communicating with Lorianne. Now, Lorianne saw Ravi as a very big, prominent Christian leader, and she was excited to just be able to have communication with him and that he was taking the time to ask her questions and invest in her life and just start some kind of communication. Now, from the beginning, Lorianne really did trust Ravi, so it didn't take long for her to open up about her childhood, her trauma, and her history, which I will tell you, that woman went through so much trauma, so much abuse in her childhood that it is just mind-boggling. Excuse me? Oh my gosh, are they like flying circles around my house? Rude. So Ravi initially started asking questions to Lorianne about her childhood, about her trauma, and just the hardships in her life. And Lorianne opened up to him and told him literally everything. She even opened up about the trauma and the problems that her husband had because he was an adoptee. And so he had a lot of problems with emotions and rejection, abandonment, and relationships because of that. And she told Ravi about it. And she's even said that she saw Ravi as not only a spiritual leader, but even a father figure to her. So she opened up to him and told him everything. Now, if you don't know about childhood trauma, especially childhood sexual abuse, which is some of the stuff that Lorianne went through, it causes such a huge problem in your life and a hole in your heart that affects you literally your entire life, especially if you haven't gone to see any kind of mental health therapist or gotten any kind of counseling to work through this kind of stuff. It leaves you in a position to where it's really easy to be re-victimized the older and older you get. The way that this happens a lot of the times is women who are, traumatized in this way, they look for people who can guide them, who can give them attention, who can pour into their lives so that they can find and feel some kind of purpose or search for answers on why this happened to them. And a lot of times those leaders that they put their trust and their faith into turn around and re-victimize them. And this is exactly what happened in Lorianne's case with Ravi. Ravi groomed her by asking her all of these very personal questions, and Lorianne opened up to him and shared absolutely everything. Lorianne started to see Ravi more and more in the space of leader, spiritual leader, father figure. And over time, Ravi started to cross those boundaries and groom her to sexually abuse and manipulate her because he knew that she was vulnerable. After a little bit, it is hard for these people to even realize that they're being re-victimized in this situation. Now, people in this situation, usually it does come to a point where they understand that the position that they're in is not a good one and that they are being manipulated and victimized. But in the case where it is somebody, especially a spiritual leader, that can be really, really, really hard to try to wrap your mind around, because on one hand, you are viewing this person as a godly figure, spiritual father, huge leader within the Christian denomination. But then on the other hand, you know what he's doing is not godly, is not okay, and that he's manipulating and abusing you. But trying to take both of these and mesh them together and come out with some kind of conclusion can be just downright overwhelming. And sometimes it even takes years to get to that point where you have processed through it enough where you understand it. When I was in the ministry and I left, it took me 2 years to even call this ministry a cult. Like, that is how much I was so wrapped up into the whole thought of they're doing really good things, they love the Lord, but trying to like bypass all of the harm that they were doing, and that the fact was they were a cult. Now, when Lori-Ann started to realize more and more how she was being manipulated and abused in this situation, she did reach out to a fellow Christian counselor. This man said that he did see Ravi's draw to Lori-Ann, but he told her that she shouldn't tell anybody what was going on, and that if she did, it would, quote, irreparably damage the kingdom of God. Now, I don't know about you, but having that weight, that spiritual responsibility weight on your shoulders can be overwhelming. When I tried to leave the ministry that I was in, cult I was in, the pastor always got me to come back by telling me that if I left, my family would never get saved and it would be my fault. And I was young, I was a teen, and I was not willing to bear that burden, so I stayed. I was spiritually manipulated into staying, and Lori-Ann Thompson was spiritually manipulated into staying quiet. Now, Lori-Ann has made a victim impact statement. It is linked in the description box below, and I highly suggest going and watching it if you can, if it's not too triggering to you. But I will tell you that it is very hard to watch and to listen to. It broke my heart. I cried multiple times. It actually took me 4 times to sit down and actually listen to the whole thing because it was just so heavy, and my heart just broke for Lori-Ann. Now, Lori-Ann does state in this victim impact statement that this was the time that she started to become very suicidal. And I just have to say, I am shocked after reading through her story and how Ravi abused her in this whole entire situation. I am shocked that Lori-Ann didn't even like attempt suicide, because that woman went through a lot. And this literally does show just how fucking strong this woman is. So at this point, Lori-Ann was silently struggling with suicidal thoughts, filled with shame, despair, and just completely overwhelmed with life and having absolutely nobody to turn to. Well, in 2016, Lori-Ann actually went to a counseling intensive with 2 other Christian counselors named Jerry and Denise. And it was during this counseling intensive that Lori-Ann opened up and told Jerry and Denise about her relationship with Ravi. Now, Jerry and Denise have said that it was very evident from the very beginning that Ravi was the one manipulating Lori-Ann in this situation and getting her to send him nude pictures and things like that. They saw it very quickly that it was an abusive situation on Ravi's part. Now, Jerry and Denise did help Lori-Ann draft a letter to send to Ravi to cut off all communication and ties with him, and to let him know that she was going to be telling her husband about their relationship. And she sent it to him during her time at this intensive. Part of her letter stated, quote, "I have no control over how he will respond to or handle the information, but I can no longer hold the secret and its soul-searing shame. Let me say I have 3 daughters. If one of my daughters was approached by a man 30 years her senior in a position of power and trust, and this type of thing had occurred, I would be furious with him. I would suspect so would you if it were one of your precious girls. You, sir, are that man. You took advantage of a devastated daughter and left her devoured once again. I am so appalled that I allowed myself to enter into this level of deception. You took and I gave a part of my soul and later my body that was not yours. The investment and relationship from taking my email to taking off my clothes makes me weep with the despair, feeling desolate, devastated, and disgusted. As for always, I recant on a vow I cannot keep. It is only he that will be with me always. Now, Ravi responds to this email pretty quickly on the same day. He actually responds with 4 emails almost back to back. Now, the first email that Ravi sends, he says, quote, "Are you going to tell him it's me?" End quote. Next email was literally just a few seconds later, and Ravi says, quote, "You promised you wouldn't. If you betray me here, I will have no option but to bid this world goodbye. I promise." 25 minutes later, Ravi responds again with another email that said, quote, "Can we not meet at least once before you do this? Please, please." 54 minutes later, Ravi responds again, and his last email says, quote, "Little did I know that was the most dark and accused day of my life. You will never hear from me again." Now, Lori-Ann's counselors were with her this entire time, and they were reading these exchanges of emails. And of course, them and everybody else reading those emails can see that Ravi is suggesting that he's going to attempt suicide. Lori-Ann's counselors drafted an email to Ravi under Lori-Ann's account, basically asking him if he was going to be okay, and that if he did not respond and let them know that he was okay and going to be okay, that they were going to have to call 911. Ravi did respond in another email saying that he was fine and that he was just worried about Lori-Ann and that he was praying for her. Now, while Lori-Ann is still at this intensive, she called her husband, Brad, back in the States. This intensive was in another country at the time. And she tells Brad everything that went on between her and Ravi and the entire situation. Now, naturally, Brad was devastated to hear this. Brad had seen Ravi as his hero, and now he's learning that Ravi had groomed his wife and that his wife had sent Ravi nude photos of herself and had been in an emotional texting, sexting type relationship with Ravi. Brad was devastated, Lori-Ann's devastated, and they're just completely broken and torn apart in this moment. Brad wasn't even sure if he wanted Lori-Ann to come home, and Lori-Ann's in another country saying that she wasn't even sure if she wanted to go home. Now, her and Brad tried to work on this, and they went to counseling and therapy and work through this, and it took, years to process all of this. Now, in the beginning of them trying to process this, just about a month after Brad learned about their relationship, Ravi and Lori-Ann, Brad actually sent an email to Ravi on November 18th, 2016. Now, remember, this is literally just a month or so from Brad knowing what happened between Ravi and his wife. In this email, it is suggested that Brad actually forgave Ravi for what he did, and he says in this email, quote, "Your momentary failure is safe with us. We assume ours is safe with you." That is the only quote I can find from that email, but it is stated that he did forgive Ravi in this email. Ravi does respond, and according to Ravi's response, this email that Brad sent must have been a lot longer, but I could not find in my research any more part of this email that Brad had sent Ravi. So Ravi responds to Brad later that day, and this was Ravi's response. Quote, "I received your message a couple of hours ago, and I kid you not, like Pilgrim of old, I felt the burden I had carried roll down as he ascended the hill with a cross on it. I truly bawled my eyes out when I read your last paragraph, Brad. That is the most incredible thing to read, that you would be cheering me on. We sing so much about grace, but there's nothing like being on the receiving end when it is a pure gift and completely undeserved by the recipient." Now, of course, Ravi is not admitting to anything in this email, but literally anybody with a brain reading that email can read between the lines that Ravi is understanding that he is not worthy of the grace and forgiveness that Brad is extending to him. So you naturally would assume that yes, Ravi did have part in what was going on between him and Lori-Ann, and that he knows that he was in the wrong. Now, Brad has faced a lot of just backlash on why he would forgive Ravi so quickly. But if you are part of the evangelical world, or have been for any amount of time, then you understand that forgiveness is a huge thing, especially if you're more on the fundamentalist conservative side of evangelicalism, that you are taught to forgive the person who wronged you. It doesn't matter if they ask for the forgiveness, that it is your job to extend that forgiveness in any way, shape, or form. To me, it just comes off that Brad is trying to be a man of honor and integrity and just on the up and up with God, and he's trying to extend that forgiveness so that we can heal and move on. Within evangelicalism, you are taught that if you don't forgive, then you're not allowing yourself to heal and move forward. So I'm sure Brad was just trying to figure out a way to heal and start to move forward past this whole entire situation. While Brad is trying to just dissect and process through all of this and learning that Ravi's the one who asked Lori-Ann for the nude photos, Brad's having a hard time processing this. He's just not understanding how a man that he saw as his hero would then turn around and groom a woman and ask her for nude pictures. Like, it's not computing in Brad's head. Brad ends up emailing Ravi again about a month after this and asks him why he would be requesting photos of somebody else's wife. Now, Ravi responds, and this is the email that just fucking pissed off Brad and Lori-Ann. Now, part of Ravi's response read, quote, "But to answer your question, I can say from my conscience that I have never initiated or proposed that action. Brad, I am not given to that kind of perverse desire." Ravi goes on in his email and just completely switches the narrative. He blames everything on Lori-Ann. He says that it was her sending these photos. Ravi didn't ask for them. Nothing whatsoever. Brad's pissed. He's like, you just completely are not taking responsibility for your part in this entire situation. You're not taking it. And that is when Lori-Ann and Brad just couldn't handle this anymore, and that is when they started seeking legal counsel to try to handle this situation and hold Ravi accountable for what he did. And this was in January of 2017 that they had received this email back from Ravi. Later in that year, August of 2017, is when they sent the letter to Ravi through their lawyer. So right now we're at the point where the Thompsons had issued the letter to Ravi with the demand letter, and now we have Ravi who has followed a RICO lawsuit against the Thompsons. Okay, from my research, I've learned that a RICO lawsuit is highly fucking complicated. It is the kind of lawsuit that can take years to go from the beginning to the end. There's a lot of litigation and lots of lawyery technical stuff that happens in a RICO lawsuit, making it highly expensive and just highly fucking drawn out. Now, people have said that it is very clear why Ravi would file this type of lawsuit against the Thompsons, because Ravi is a man, the head of RZIM, meaning he's got a shit ton of money and donors backing him. Lori-Ann has even stated that Ravi had made the comment that he had a donor that was willing and ready to back the entire lawsuit financially, meaning he had no worries going into this, none whatsoever. But he knew that this would be an intimidation factor for the Thompsons, because even though they're well off with their money, they don't have that kind of finances to pay for a freaking RICO lawsuit that's going to be drawn out for years and years and years. So because of that factor alone, and knowing the power and finances that Ravi has behind him that the Thompsons just don't, they ended up choosing to have a settlement with Ravi. Now, the settlement at the beginning was not very well known to a lot of people, like the logistics of what was included in this settlement. All we knew is that a settlement had taken place and that an NDA was signed. Now, I don't know about you, but anytime an NDA is being forced to be signed, to me that just screams red flag. He's trying to hide shit. Like, it can't just be me. Now I'm gonna pronounce this woman's last name wrong, and I'm sorry, Ruth, if you ever watch this, but Ruth Malhotra, who was a former public relations officer at RZIM, has come forward with a 26-page letter that she had actually written to the chairperson of the board at RZIM. She wrote this letter back, I think, early 2021, before the report of the most recent allegations against Ravi came out. In this 26-page letter, she addresses a lot about what happened during the lawsuit between, she addresses a lot about what happened during the time of the lawsuit between Ravi and the Thompsons. In her letter, she states that Ravi admitted to her that he had lengthy conversations on the phone with Lori Ann. His excuse for having these lengthy conversations was because he said that Lori Ann had really long prayer requests. And he admitted to Ruth that he had more than one phone, that he actually had 2 to 3. And when Ruth asked him if these phones were for ministry or personal, Ravi avoided the question. Also in Ruth's letter, where we find out that Ravi refused to turn over his phone records to the board or RZIM Ministries during this investigation. Now, in this letter, Ruth also lets us know that senior leadership at RZIM knew that Ravi had multiple phones and that he refused to turn over his phone records during this time. And she says that senior leadership told all the other staff members at RZIM that the board was aware of absolutely everything that was going on. Ruth said that she has had multiple conversations with different board members, and it's very evident that a lot of this evidence during this time the board had no idea about. And she questions whether the senior leadership even told the board that Ravi had multiple phones and that he was refusing to turn over his records. So remember, the lawsuit was settled in November of 2017. Staff had asked senior leadership and the president, Michael Ramsden, if money had exchanged hands. Donors had been calling in asking if money had exchanged hands during this settlement, and they were continually either avoiding the question, or Michael himself would make statements saying that no, money did not exchange hands. In December of 2017, the staff somehow accidentally found out that a $250,000 settlement was made, and the $250,000 was paid from Ravi to Lori Ann. This was highly confusing for many members of the staff at RZIM because it was Ravi who initiated the actual lawsuit, but he was the one to make the settlement to Lori Ann. Like, if there was all of this evidence proving that he was innocent, proving that he had no part in this, and that it was Lori Ann herself that was initiating these conversations, that was, sending him unsolicited nude pictures, then he would have no reason to make this settlement. He would have no reason to agree to make this $250 payment to Lori Ann if he had all this evidence that proved that he was completely innocent and it was all the Thompsons. So everyone's highly, highly, highly confused at this moment. But with somebody like Ravi, who is a huge leader, a lot of the times, I hate to say it, but it's the truth, a lot of the times these really big charismatic leaders within Christianity are highly narcissistic. Highly fucking narcissistic. And Ravi was no exception. He had a really good way of being able to explain off literally everything and paint the Thompsons in a very, very, very bad light. Ravi has the following. Ravi has the money. Ravi has all the power. Now, remember, in this settlement, not only did Ravi pay Lori Ann Thompson $250,000, he also required her to sign an NDA. Like I said before, NDAs in this kind of situation are just, the biggest red flag you can possibly think of. So Lori Ann Thompson and Brad have signed this NDA, as well as Ravi. Now, if you don't know what an NDA is, let me explain that. So it stands for a non-disclosure agreement. That is usually used within a lawsuit, or a lot of times people will use them when you are like fired from a company, or if you quit, you have to sign an NDA that you're not going to disclose proprietary information within the company or from the company that you learned, or whatever. They're used in lawsuits when a settlement is, reached. Both parties have to sign this NDA, meaning that this lawsuit or agreement is not going to be talked about to literally anyone. So on the Thompsons case, they were not allowed to talk to family members, friends, or make any kind of public statement regarding this case. It was signed, sealed, and delivered at this moment. Unfortunately, because Ravi is famous, he has the power, the following, the money, everything. Ravi did not stand by this NDA, and quickly after this settlement, he made a statement, a very lengthy statement, which broke the NDA. Shocker. A Christian leader feeling like the rules don't apply to them. Where have I heard that before? Part of the statement that Ravi made after the settlement in part reads, quote, "Let me state categorically that I never met Lorianne Thompson alone, publicly or privately. The question is not whether I solicited or sent any illicit photos or messages to her. I did not, and there is no evidence to the contrary, but rather whether I should have been a willing participant in any extended communication with a woman, not my wife." The answer, I can unequivocally say, is no, and I fully accept responsibility. He made sure in this statement to say that he had been always been faithful to his wife, Margie, and that he was not out of line in anything that he did not cross any kind of boundaries, but basically saying that he received these photos and he should have gone to the board and cut off communication with her right then. As we know, that is not the case. That is not what happened. So poor Lorianne and Brad were made to be the bad guys. Ravi painted them in the worst light during this entire lawsuit, calling them extortionists, calling them hooligans, and blaming all of this entire thing on Satan and a satanic attack, constantly vilifying the Thompsons. And signing this NDA meant that the Thompsons couldn't come back after Ravi made this statement. Yeah, he broke the NDA, but they already saw how much power and money Ravi held and how unsuccessful they were in fighting against him, that they didn't do anything when he fought the NDA. They stayed quiet. For years, the world saw Lorianne Thompson and Brad in a very negative light, and it played a huge impact in both of their lives. They spent years trying to pick up the shattered pieces and cope with the situation. They ended up having to even sell their house and move to a place where they had just a little bit more anonymity. And because of Ravi's popularity and power and just stature within the Christian community, it didn't take long for people to just kind of forget about this entire scandal and move on. Ravi continued ministering and getting donors and just making a ton of money within the Christian community. Unfortunately, Ravi did pass away in May of 2020, and just 4 months after his passing, Christianity Today posted an article exposing allegations against Ravi for sexually abusing many massage therapists at 2 of the day spas that Ravi actually had co-owned. I'm going to be looking down a lot during this time. I want to make sure that I'm getting the information correct, so just bear with me. So after these allegations came forward, RZIM stated, nope, they're false, absolutely no way. And they made a statement saying that it didn't comport with the man they knew. So in Ruth's 26-page letter, she goes into detail about how RZIM handled this entire situation. She states that on September 8th, 2020, had their very first meeting to talk about how they were going to handle these allegations against Ravi. She said that when the topic of an investigation got brought up in this meeting, that a lot of people in this meeting really resisted the idea of doing an investigation of any sort. Specifically, a man named Abdul Murray. He's on staff at RZIM, and he actually suggested doing a investigation, like hiring a private investigator to investigate the women who were making these allegations, saying that they had checkered pasts and that it would be really easy to like paint them in the light of being false. Basically saying that it would be really easy to paint them in a negative light and make people question whether the allegations they were making were even true. So basically Abdul's opinion is that if you have any kind of history with the law, or you're not a good person, or you're a drug addict, or whatever, then there's absolutely no way that you could be a victim of sexual assault. Like, what the fuck? Abdul, what the fuck? Thankfully, during this meeting, Mark DeMoise, who was actually another public relations officer within RZIM, stated that that was not going to be a way that they needed to investigate this. It was not going to make RZIM look any better during this situation. Abdul fought against Mark during this meeting, saying that no, I think it would be a good idea. Mark continually stood his ground and just told Abdul that that wasn't going to work, that that was not the way that they should investigate this, because it would just make RZIM look even worse than they already do at the moment. By the end of this meeting, the entire staff did agree that they were going to hire an investigation firm to investigate the allegations, but that they all agreed that the investigation would show absolutely nothing because the allegations were false and they had nothing to be afraid of. Ruth states that many times the staff continually undermined the voices of the victims in this situation. Ruth had said that there was no easy way for victims to come forward and tell their story, and she said that she had heard this from other staff and donors. Ruth had even went to Sarah Davis, who is actually Ravi Zacharias' daughter. During this time, she was part of the board at RZIM, and she went to her saying that they needed to make a statement asking if victims who had any information would come forward and share their story or talk with investigators. Ruth had even advocated this to other members within RZIM staff, and Abdul, the jackass, had stated that, well, that would assume that we think or know that there's more victims. Abdul even at times argued and pushed back on whether they were going to publish the findings from the investigation. Now, Sarah Davis had told staff on September 15th that an investigation firm had been hired and they were doing an investigation into the allegations against Ravi. But in reality, the investigation firm wasn't hired and start their investigation until October 7th. Literally 3 weeks later. I remember RZIM from the beginning had said that these allegations were false. That was their belief, that was their opinion from the very get-go. Now, Ruth also said that they had a meeting on September 24th, 2020, where Ruth advocated to the staff that they needed to include an investigation into the accusations against Ravi from Lori Ann Thompson. She said that this would make the investigation a full and entire investigation and show people that they're taking this serious and want absolute truth. She also advocated for victims during this meeting, stating that she told the board and the staff that they needed to avoid using triggering language towards the abused victims. Unfortunately, during this meeting, Ruth said that the staff had considered, thankfully they didn't use it, but they had considered making a statement that read, Jesus Christ, quote, sadly, what was largely a case of she said, he said 3 years ago has become a case of she said, he's dead. While we respect that there are some who disagree with us about this process and our disposition, we respectfully decline to investigate after Ravi's death a matter we believe to have been thoroughly investigated during his life. If that's not a slap in the face to literally every victim that had come forward making allegations against Ravi and Lori Ann Thompson herself, I don't know what is. Now, thankfully, they didn't make this statement public. Thank God. But still, the fact that they even considered making this statement is just atrocious. So basically, through this entire investigation, the woman, Ruth, who her whole entire job is public relations, everything she is telling this ministry to do, they're ignoring her. right and left and right and left and right and left. Like, I think the thing that frustrates me the most about that statement is the fact that they said that this case had been thoroughly investigated, you know, the one between Ravi and Lori-Ann, when we know it actually hadn't, because Ruth said earlier in her letter that the board didn't even know that Ravi had multiple phones and didn't even know that Ravi had refused to turn over his phone records. Like, what? No, you did not investigate it. Not only that, but the board, the president of RZIM and Ravi himself had lied for weeks about there being an exchange of money with the settlement. Like, what? Also the NDA. Like, how can people not see these red flags? Now, Ruth goes on in her letter to talk about the culture at RZIM when it pertains to the Zacharias family. She said it was very evident from early on that the Zacharias family was treated highly different than literally everyone else. She said when she first started at RZIM, she learned that the Zacharias family was not somebody to cross. And her manager at the time in 2013 had even made that statement to her to not cross the Zacharias family. So she quickly realized that the Zacharias family was just treated highly different, and the standards that they were held to was much different than the standards that everyone else at RZIM was held to. She brings to light the fact that the Zacharias family misused funds within the ministry. She even brings up that there was a couple who had a nanny within RZIM, and that nanny was paid by RZIM, but on paper, this nanny was actually said to have been the assistant to Margie, Ravi's wife, when in reality she was actually the nanny. It also says that another staff member had told her, quote, "I've always thought it was odd, but it's just another way that there is a different standard for the Zacharias family. These things are not a secret, but no one will say anything." So Ravi had a bad back. We'll get into more of that later, but he had a bad back, so when he traveled, he actually had a traveling masseuse that would go with him. In this letter, Ruth talks about how there was a masseuse that was on payroll under the Touch of Hope ministry, and she states that the Touch of Hope ministry was never adequately explained to anybody on staff, and yet this lady was being paid through Touch of Hope ministry within RZIM, but no one knew what the hell was going on or what it was used for or what the fuck it was. Now, I'll get into Touch of Hope, but that's going to be in episode 2, so just wait. We'll learn what that is. Like I said, Ravi had a bad back, and this was no secret. Apparently, I think he had a couple of surgeries. He had a lot of like lower back pain, and how he treated this was by getting massages. And so when he traveled, he had a traveling masseuse that went with him. Huh? Like, I'm not saying that you can't have a traveling masseuse go with you. Like, I want me a traveling masseuse. Like, I love massages. But to be a man within like an apologetics ministry, more conservative, and hiring a masseuse to go with you, like, that just seems weird, okay? And it's not just me. Many members of staff, including Zacharias' family, had made the comment that they were worried about this because, not that they were worried that Ravi was being, inappropriate, but that they were worried about just the view of impropriety from other people's, seeing this going on and him having a traveling masseuse with him. So Michael Ramsden, who was the president at RZIM, actually went to Ravi and talked to him about this and told him, it doesn't look good. It gives the impression that, impropriety could be going on. So we want to avoid that. Well, Ravi was like, "Oh, how dare you accuse me of something so vile?" And basically stopped talking to Michael for like 2 years. Yep. So after that, Michael was like, "Fuck that. I don't want to be on Ravi's bad side." So they never brought it up again. So basically, Ravi himself was above reproach. Like, don't you come after Ravi and tell him what he's doing is wrong, because you're going to be the one to pay the consequence. And that happened. Michael did that. Even Ruth has stated that she approached Ravi about this when she first started working with him, and she got a rational shit for it. And basically, like, Ravi ignored her for a while too. So nobody can hold Ravi accountable. That's not a red flag. Not at all. Nope. So Ruth knew this. Ruth knew that Ravi was above reproach and just wouldn't handle being, asked questions. But Ruth had a heart to advocate for victims, and she asked questions during the entire scandal with Lorianne Thompson. And she asked questions to the board, she asked questions to Ravi, she asked questions to other staff members. And unfortunately, Ruth paid for that. So the staff had actually decided that they thought Ruth was compiling evidence on her electronics to basically go against Ravi and try to do this in a way that she could try to promote herself. And they made her take a paid leave, and they made her immediately turn over all of her electronics. Oh my gosh, that's so weird. They didn't make Ravi do that. I wonder why. I can already hear it now. My husband's gonna be like, I listened to your video and that voice, I hated that. And now he's smiling. I love you, hubby. All right, I digress. Moving on. So during this leave of absence, Ruth sought counsel, and she eventually did come back to RZIM because she just so highly believed in their mission and what they were doing. So she came back. She said during the next 2 years, it was really, really difficult because what evidence was in the public just did not go with what Ravi had said happened. And she said she was confronted many times by donors and other staff asking her questions. God fucking A, we have another plane. Oh my God, I swear, I feel like it takes forever for the planes to fly over. It's like they stop over my house and just like fucking sit there. Oh my God, I think he turned around. There's another one. Jesus Christ. All right, I won't record on Saturdays anymore, okay? I've learned my lesson, but seriously, I can't keep stopping it. So Ruth faced a lot of backlash. She is the public relations officer. So during these 2 years, people are approaching her right and left, just trying to process through this entire scandal and seeing what's posted online, seeing the evidence, and not able to make sense of how that all fits together. Ruth states in her letter that in 2018, RZIM had a chaplain named Tom. Tom approached Ruth, and during conversation, Tom said to her, quote, "Something of a serious moral nature happened, and Ravi is asking for it to be covered up. It is not possible to reconcile the documents in the public domain with Ravi's accounts of events. I'm frankly mystified that people as intelligent as Michael and Abdul would not allow themselves to grasp the obvious." She also said that Tom would often express how concerned he was about the fact that Ravi was above reproach, unlike other people within the ministry. Tom even said, quote, "He doesn't have accountability, and that exposes him to all kinds of danger and leaves him with no place to go. It's just going to get worse and more will come out. This stuff is not going away. It's not slowing. Rather, it's gaining momentum. I don't know when, but if there is something more, and I believe there is, then it will come out. At some point, Christianity Today is going to do another article, but they are wise. They're not going to come out with a new accusation against Ravi unless they have very strong, incontrovertible evidence." Now, Tom, you are a wise damn man. He saw through Ravi's bullshit, and he knew this. He knew Ravi was to blame. He knew Ravi had impropriety, and he knew that he was actively trying to cover it up, and that people were letting themselves just be mystified with Ravi's greatness and not actually see the evidence right in front of their fucking face. case. So that is where we are going to end part 1. I know I'm leaving you on a cliffhanger. I am so sorry. But guys, literally this video, in this case, it took me 3 weeks to research, and I mean hours of research. I want to make sure and do this case like justice, and so that's why I don't feel it is good to weed out any of these major parts. So that's why we're making it into part 1 and into a part 2. I always feel really weird at the end of these videos to be like, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, because they're always so heavy and disgusting and just frustrating beyond belief. So help me, put a comment below. Like, what? How do I close these out? I'm just gonna end it with thank you guys for coming and watching part 1. Remember, if you find this kind of content interesting, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that bell so you do not miss any of the uploads. Also, below in the description box is my Instagram and my TikTok. I'm way more active on TikTok, so go ahead and give me a follow over there. I would highly appreciate it. I love you all. Once again, have a great week, okay? Bye!